I'm your host, Micah Versman, and you're listening to the Producer Podcast Highlights. Over the course of each season, we like to ask our guest a number of questions to get a variety of answers on the same topic. Today, we're excited to start releasing those questions as special compilation episodes of the show known as the Producer Podcast Highlights. So without further ado, let's jump in and get started. So today, on the first episode of these compilation specials, we're sitting down with our producers to talk to them about what they wish they would have known when they were first getting started as a filmmaker, or more specifically, as a film producer. So up first, we have Matthew Jordan, the producer on the feature film Countercolumn.
Ultimately, I think it comes down to planning. Being more planned out is so critical. And making sure all your locations are locked before you start filming the film is so critical. And yeah, things will come up and a location will drop. But deal with that when the problem comes up. Don't make that a problem going into filming. I think that was the biggest thing that killed us, was just the fact that we hadn't locked locations before we started filming. You want to lock all your actors before you start filming. You know, that was another stressor. We hadn't cast our lead drill sergeant until like the week before filming at basic training. These just stressors. They add stress to what you're already experiencing. I would have more people helping me. But that takes coordination, that takes planning. And so, you personally have to be super planned out so that you know what needs done and you know who needs to do it and who you need to do it so that you can get it done in a fast enough time. I say get people that know more than you. That's like the biggest thing. There's so many people on Countercolumn that knew more than me and Gilbert. And that's honestly what made it into like a real film set. This was our first time. We didn't know what a real film set was. But, our assistant director, he made it run like a real film set. He brought, so many people brought knowledge of what these different roles, crew roles, were supposed to be. And that made the difference. I think we've decided to do another film. The acting is one of the things that we really want to try to invest more into. So I think a good part of the budget on a next project ideally would go towards paying actors that people recognize, because that basically makes your film more attractive to a potential distributor. I can't speak from experience on this one, but I think I've heard from other people that you don't even want to make a film until you have a distributor on board. And so if you want to guarantee where this film's going to go, you should have a distributor that you start with. So they're not necessarily funding you. You could I'm sure you could work out a deal where you provide the funding yourself, but you basically tell them, I'm planning to make it for this much money. I plan to have these actors in it. I plan to whatever. And you work out something with a distributor. And so that way, everything that you're doing is with the end in mind. And that's what's hard. What's hard for us. We spent all of our budget on production. And so we had to raise more money to get out of debt and then to also raise money for post-production. And thank God we were able to, like, he brought in the money. We were able to spend a good amount on post-production to finish the film. But if we couldn't have spent that money on post-production, I don't know where we'd be right now. So I would budget for post-production. I would also budget for marketing. We didn't hardly budget anything for marketing. And this coming in, I wanted to, but it's when you have the pressing matter of, this is like a life or death situation when it comes to production. Because if you don't finish production, you don't have a movie. If you don't do it well, you don't have a good movie. And so all the money gets sucked out real quick. I'd say, budget for marketing, budget for post-production. And this is stuff that, like, talk to other people for price reference. You can get people that are good, but talk to them in advance. That's the thing with planning, is like, speak to all these people that could potentially edit, that could potentially sound design, all these things, and have them quote you early so you can budget correctly. You're limited when it's your first film. And, there's a lot of things that we couldn't do because it was our first film. And that's why I'm really pumped for film number 2, because I think we have this film as like a launch pad in a lot of ways. and people can see, oh, we actually made a film. We actually finished a film. And that, I think, is probably the biggest portfolio piece you could ever have. It's like a completed feature film. So.
Next up, we're joined by producer Scott Peterson. Scott recently produced and released the feature film Treasure Lies.
The only thing I can really think of is that the cost involved in each of the different things. I had no idea. We set our budget initially on the first one at like $15,000, and I was going to edit it, and I did. I edited it the first time, and I had a 2-hour movie, and it's like we handed it over to a professional, and he got me a good an hour and a half movie out of it, and but again, he charged, and so then we had to keep adding more and more to the budget, and so getting a more realistic idea of what things cost is where I'm at now. It's like the first time it like hits you in the face, and then you kind of like, okay, and then you kind of, it's a tough pill to swallow, but then you just keep moving on and figure out what you need to do for the next movie and how to raise the funds for it.
Up next, we have Katherine Johnson of Sheepshed Entertainment.
On my first few features, this is just normal human nature where you think everybody is looking at me. Everybody is looking at me all the time. Like I'm on set, everybody is going to be able to look at me and know that I don't know what I'm doing, or that this is my very first time, or I've only been on set 12 hours and don't know anybody. What do I do? So I spent a lot of time on my first feature trying to be as out of the way as possible. But the problem was that meant miles from set. Now, granted, I was on walkie, so I was always doing my job. But if there was like, okay, we're rolling, there's always a normal little lull during that time. And I would just get myself as far away as possible. And as a result, I did not get to observe as much because I was too concerned with not being in anyone's way that there was no way they even knew where I was. So... besides like, oh yeah, that's her way over there. So if I wish I could have reassured myself with the simple words that the camera cannot see you if you're standing behind the camera. Which sounds incredibly logical, but when you are scared stiff that you're going to mess up in front of some big time producer or director or first AD, then just to be reminded that, hey, don't make noise, but as long as you're not in front of the lens, you really are fine. Because traffic patterns of grips, like if you're in the way of a grip, they're going to let you know.
That is
and you
true.
will either be impaled or you will no longer be there. So there's really almost no way that you could be in the way and then not be told that you were in the way. So that would be the most reassuring thing I could tell myself if I could go back.
All right.
Now we're pleased to welcome back Jared O'Flaherty. Jared is the producer on the hit TV show Vindication, which is currently streaming its second season.
It would be that there are lots and lots of people out there who want to get involved in this art form. When I first started out, it was like me trying to find people. Hey, would you please come help me with this project? Would you please come work on it? And maybe that comes with success once you've completed some things and people are pleased with the results. Now they want to work with you. But when I started out, I was like, I don't have actors, I don't have crew, but people are out there that do want to get the experience and be involved in the art form. So you don't have to think you're alone or I have to do everything. There are people out there. You just have to find the right opportunities to connect with them and meet them and, express that we both share the same interest in the art form. A great example is the feature film that I did through our church a few years back. Like for our casting calls, we're just like whatever members we went and asked, hey, would you come out and audition for this role? We think you might be able to do it, and it would be 2 or 3 people. When all around us in Dallas-Fort Worth, there were tons and tons of actors and actresses who this is their craft, they're aspiring, and they would have loved that opportunity to come and audition and be a part of it, even if it wasn't for pay and it was just a church project. There were lots of people out there. We just didn't know how to reach them, and we didn't know they were out there. So instead, it was like, grabbing cousins and friends and, that kid's little brother and, or stuff like that to come audition. as opposed to reaching out into the community and finding those that do have an interest. I had some auditions where nobody showed up, and I had some where one person showed up, and it was like, do we even need to do the audition? Because you're getting the role. We don't know if you can act at all, but once you've been through that process, you're like, man, if only I had known. Because now, we put stuff out and we get 400 submissions from people, and they're like, I'll work for free, I'll travel, all these things, and you're like, man, where were you back when it was praying that somebody would show up so that you would have a cast member, regardless if they could act or not.
Continuing on with our season 1 guest, we have Hannah Bartlett. Hannah is the producer at Bartlett Idea Co., a creative agency that focuses on commercial and promotional films.
I think when I first was getting started as a producer, I wish that I would have known about using the budget and using the producing process as a creative tool. For me, thinking more logistically, it can be easy to get stuck in those details of like, well, this is going to work or not work or budget or whatever. But really thinking, okay, how can I use this to tell the story and support the director in his vision? And then another thing too, I guess, is just really how important systems and processes are. That's huge. Just being able to have, okay, this is how I do my budgeting. This is how I the crew contracts that we have. This is how we do this. So having that system of even just the order that you do things in, every project's going to be different, but if you at least have that general idea, it can save you so much time. So I wish I would have, known more about that. Over the years, we've been able to create those kind of slowly over time, and we're still working on it. But I think that's a huge part of the process.
Now we're pleased to welcome from season 2 of the Producer Podcast, Aaron Van Manen. Aaron works at Good Era, a commercial film production company located in Northeast Iowa.
Oh, this is one that I think about a lot. Right when we started Good Era, I just, as a person, I kind of am driven somewhat off of anxiety, where I'm always constantly worried, thinking like, oh, are we making this the best it can be, or can we do this differently? And so it kind of led me, right when we started the business, to really struggle with like a work-life balance, where not having that kind of clock in, clock out way to go about your workday, it was really hard for me to kind of shut off. And I would just find myself working into the night and being like, oh, I can work on this edit, and not really turn it off ever. So I would tell myself to really focus in on that early, because I feel like that's such a healthy way to go about just working from home and working and having your own business, and finding that work-life balance early, because it definitely, I'm still working on it, but I think I've definitely grown a lot in that, and being able to find that line of, you know what, you can pause for the day, pick it back up in the morning, and be able to be a little bit healthier that way. I would definitely tell my past self to do that.
And also from season 2 of the Producer Podcast, we are joined by David Cook.
When I started out producing, the very first project that I produced, I was trying to be the best producer.
Okay.
And I felt like me being the best producer meant I would finish in budget. We wouldn't ever have long days on production. All the things that would make the producer look good. Mm-hmm. And I think really the key is understanding that it's not about the producer. It's about the team. And so what I learned on that first production, when I was trying to keep everybody to a 12-hour day and make sure everybody was taking care of themselves and getting enough sleep, for everyone else, being good at their job meant something different.
Okay.
For the cinematographer, it meant doing the very best camera work possible. For the wardrobe people, it meant having the very best costumes, having those fit perfectly, having everything work properly. For the sound guy, it meant getting the very best sound possible, even if you had to turn off everything in the world to get it. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that your job is not what matters, it's not what's important.
Yeah.
If I had really had a better understanding of that going into that first project, it would have made it a lot easier for me. So I think just really understanding that as a producer, your job is a helper to everybody else. It's to facilitate and provide and assist everyone else is one of the most helpful things to keep everything in perspective. You remember why you're doing something, what your goal is. A producer cannot make a movie. In fact, I would wager that a producer does very little of the actual making a movie, unless it's a super low budget 5-person crew.
Yeah.
So the producer is essential to making a movie, but they're not actually running the camera usually. They're not usually acting. They're not usually, right? Mm-hmm. They're a facilitator. So it's just embracing and understanding what the job really is. Yes, it's a lot of problem solving. Yes, it's a lot of, managing logistics and difficult situations and making sure that everybody gets paid. But really, you're trying to help everybody else be able to do their job to the best they can. So just being willing to listen, realizing that you have a team of people, not just, the people are not gear. You want to be able to work with the same people several times, not burn people out. Mm-hmm. So I think just, having that vision of a facilitator, of someone that's serving the team, trying to help everyone move forward, I think is a very healthy thing. And so it was very challenging and humbling for me on that first project when we had this big group meeting, because I was like, hey guys, we need to adjust our project to our scope, to the budget we have, to the time that we have. We need to trim it down. And they were like, you're asking us to... Basically, I realized I was asking them to sacrifice doing their jobs well so that it made my job look like I was doing it well. Okay. And we have a job to do, and it's important to do it well, and it's important to make sure people are getting enough sleep and that things are done safely. That's very important. We just have to understand where everybody else is coming from, too. So I think just being willing to hear, to listen, to understand where other people are coming from, to facilitate, those are important things that if I had had a better understanding of early on, probably would have made me a lot less stressed, a lot happier.
And wrapping up this special compilation episode of the show, we have Sarah Burnett. Sarah is the producer at Realcast Productions, a promo and commercial film production company.
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that it's okay to be really nerdy, and film needs that. And I used to feel like maybe I wasn't as creative as other filmmakers I saw. And so I was kind of intimidated to be in meetings with them, or to have ideas, or to create work. And what I found is producers are as essential to a project as a director. And every department says it. I know they all say it. They say a movie would be nothing without sound, and a movie would be nothing without color, and a movie is nothing without editing. And so I understand that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it can feel like, but I just wrote a schedule. But the thing is, if you can't keep a team on a schedule, you can't make a movie. So there is no creative without producing. And it's okay to just be left brain about things. You need to obviously have people skills and be understanding of all those right brain people who are making the project. But it is totally okay to be left brain and to manage that. And it is needed just like the creative. And I think if I would have known that earlier, I just would have had more confidence to do what I do, which is really helpful for a producer. You need to have a confidence so you can be calm, you can be collected, you can know what you need to know. There's nothing wrong. Like, the budget's always in my mind, the schedule's always in my mind, and that's my job. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I wish I would have embraced sooner.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast Highlights. Stay tuned for more Producer Podcast highlights, as well as news on upcoming new episodes and seasons of the show. Until then, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.